Welcome, friends. Today's talk is on dreams. Every first and third Sunday, we have a roundtable reading and discussion on a particular topic after this particular meeting. Today, being the third Sunday of December, we will continue with our study of the Bhagavad Gita and related notes. Next Sunday, it being the last Sunday before Christmas, there will be a presentation on what this time of the year means to all. We'd love for you to join us here at 4865A Cordell Avenue for these meetings, and just in Bethesda, Maryland, for the Washington, D.C. area, really, we operate for. We study pure theosophy. It's a life to be lived. The United Lodge of Theosophy Declaration is: the policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a true realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it needs to disseminate this idea among theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards the theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita, starting here on page 129. Imbued with pure discrimination, restraining yourself with resolution, having rejected the charms of sound and other objects of senses, and casting off attachment and dislike, dwelling in secluded places, eating little, with speech, body, and mind controlled, engaging in constant meditation, and unwaveringly fixed in dispassion, abandoning egotism, arrogance, violence, vanity, desire, anger, pride, and possession, with calmness ever present, a man is fitted to be the Supreme Being. And having thus attained to the Supreme, he is serene, sorrowing no more, and no more desiring, but alike towards all creatures. He attains to supreme devotion to me. By this devotion to me, he knoweth fundamentally who and what I am, and having thus discovered me, he enters into me without any intermediate condition. And even the man who is always engaged in action shall attain by my favor to the eternal and incorruptible, imperishable abode, if he puts his trust in me alone. With thy heart place all that works on me, prefer me to all else. Exercise mental devotion continually, and think constantly of me. By so doing, thou shalt by my divine favor surmount every difficulty which surroundeth thee. But if from pride thou wilt not listen to my words, thou shalt undoubtedly be lost. And if indulging self-confidence thou sayest, I will not fight, such a determination will prove itself vain. For the principles of thy nature will impel thee to engage. Being bound by all past karma to thy natural deities, thou, O son of Kunti, wilt involuntarily do from necessity that which in thy folly thou wouldst not do. There dwelleth in the heart of every creature, O Arjuna, the Master, Ishvara, who by his magic power causeth all things and creatures to revolve, mounted upon the universal wheel of time. Take sanctuary with him alone, O son of Bharata, with all thy soul. By his grace thou shalt obtain supreme happiness, the eternal place. Thus have I made known unto thee this knowledge, which is a mystery more than secret, and secrecy itself. Ponder it fully in thy mind, and act as seem best unto thee. And now for today's talk. Dreams.
Good morning and welcome, friends. This topic is of interest to everyone because we all dream. HPB has a whole section under dreams in the transactions, and she covers a lot of ground concerning dreams, and it would be very beneficial to everyone if you would read it. It's on page, it starts on page 59, and there's a whole chapter on it. Today's talk comes from the teachings. It has been gathered from different publications that HPB made. In order to understand true dreams, because there are a lot of dreams, in fact 7 different kinds, we need to understand first of all who is dreaming, where this dreaming is taking place, and where the personal man is in all of this. Now, in the writings, HPB clarifies for us the 4 states of evolution that we go through. And at this stage, we're 5 principled beings. 5 principled beings. The other 2 do not incarnate in us at this time. So Manas is the mind, and after we became 4 principled beings, the desire principle was the most prominent. then we try to rise above contacting higher intelligences. That is when the mind or reasoning capacity came into us. It was lighted by the Kumaras, as you all know. Now, she tells us in the course of evolution, soul became a Pitri. And this has tremendous importance. Pitri, Pitar fathers, a Pitri, or fully flowered kamic entity. And its Indriyas and Karma Indriyas gave it contact with and impressions from higher and more evolved intelligences, from which arose the idea of thought or self-perception, opposed to desire perception. And this is where we are. So then the state of consciousness called Kamamanas, and which is the human waking consciousness of each one of us, is the self-consciousness we're talking about. So we are self-conscious, but it is Kamamanas that we use. In most cases, it is Kamamanas. Now, in this writing, which we don't have time to cover all of it, we're told that the civilization of Europe is still with the desire principle mostly, because they belong to the fourth. But the population in America, United States, especially Canada and so forth, and the South America to some degree, are using this Kamamanas, but not as desire principle, but as reasoning power. So it is mind that is in the ascendancy here, but still it is the lower mind, and hence it gives tremendous creative power to individuals who are using it. So the present humanity, she tells us, is therefore the lunar hierarchies of Pitris, which through metempsychosis and reincarnation have become the men in fleshly bodies that we know and are. Still the same souls as always, but by accretion we have developed that manas. And when a human being is internally awakened to the reality as a soul, where is that person? That individual is only halfway through the journey. So when we identify ourselves with humanity as a kingdom and each individual as a unit of it, with responsibility for all of the lower kingdoms, mineral, vegetable, and animal, as well as all of the elementals that occupy those kingdoms, we're halfway our journey. In other words, through self-induced, self-devised effort, we now have to go outward to home where we had first started our journey, coming into substance. I'm sorry, that is all that can be said about that subject at this time. It's a talk on its own, and many a time we have covered it. So, dreams then are variously classifiable, though they all fall under the one category of the impressions made on the brain, the organ of Kamamanas, or the waking state of human consciousness, of the experiences of the soul in other states, whether those states be higher or lower than Kamamanas. Being impressions, they are always subjective to the waking consciousness that is subordinated to it, and the brain being for those experiences merely the recording instrument of the soul. No experiences of other states can be remembered in waking state except subject to the limitations of the brain, which may be either a palimpsest, in which those impressions from other states may be confused with impressions made in the waking state, or a dull surface mirroring only shadows and grotesque distortions, or a polished surface reflecting brilliantly but evanescently, or a sensitized plate retaining faithfully every light and shade of the soul's perceptions, its thought, will, and feeling photographed from another world onto the instrument of this, which is the brain. So we have just classified all of the many things that can happen during dreams. First, these are impressions that can be confused with the waking expressions or impressions of the soul, or it can be mirroring shadows and grotesque distortions. It might be a polished surface reflecting brilliantly but evanescently, or this one, the last one, which is the most important one, a sensitized plate retaining faithfully every light and shade of the soul's perceptions, its thought, will, and feeling photographed from another world onto the instrument of this. Now, looking from without inwardly, the brain is the synthesizing instrument of the five senses, the receiver of all their impressions of which the soul is aware. It is the end organ of objective things on their way inwards to subjectivity. It is the karma indriya of the indriyas. Looking from within outwardly, the brain is the instrument for the five koshas, sheaths. Koshas are sheaths, the end organ of all the expressions of the soul on their way outwards to objectivity. This is that passing from one into another in a double, centrifugal and centripetal way, or the seven states of consciousness and the soul's experiences in them, of which the secret doctrine treats. So then, in fact, this dual telegraphy between the higher and the lower, between the lower and the higher states and experiences of the soul, goes on constantly in each one of us. The soul is aware of what it requires, but has not yet perfected its instruments and processes because its intelligence is not yet perfected, and therefore is constantly checked by its karma, both without and within, in its ceaseless efforts to gain true impressions and make true expressions of nature and of itself. So then, this telegraphy is taking place inwards and outwards. Okay? The soul then is communicating with the personal man through kama manas, is what this is. So this telegraphy is between the higher and the lower, and between the lower and the higher. So when it is center out, it is centrifugal energy. But when it is from impressions coming from the outside in, it is centripetal energy. And this is the telegraphy: in, out, out, in, continuously going on. All the seven states of consciousness constantly exist, and they are all in coordination, for it is the soul that receives all impressions, whose various classes make up the states, but they are not all in consubstantiality, for in any state the soul is confused by thinking that that state is the real, and limited by the instrument in use in that state, both as to the quantity and quality of impressions sought to be obtained, and the quality and quality of the intelligence sought to be expressed. It makes no difference what names we give to the instruments and machinery of impression and expression. The fact to be realized is that consciousness can only well up, that is, manifest its true nature, or assimilate, that is, gain further intelligence in exact accord with the instrument or instrument is in use on any plane. all knowledge exists. This each soul knows in its own highest kosha. Hence the ceaseless urge in all nature and the ceaseless efforts of all souls in all environments to gain further knowledge and increase the area of their conscious action. This consideration of the instrument in use, its functions and limitation, leads directly to the perception of the reason why experiences of the human being on other planes and in other states can never bear any other aspect than that of a dream to kama manas, as well as to the understanding of the bewildering chaos of those dreams themselves and the like chaos of our Western attempts to explore, define, and classify them. A further consideration of the same subject will explain the phenomenon of deep sleep, when the soul is engaged in experiencing through the appropriate kosha in a state so much higher than kama manas that it is no more possible to bring through any of those experiences than it would be possible to take a photograph by the light from the Milky Way. The nature and character of those experiences are at such vast removes from ordinary daily waking life, kama manas, that no impression whatever of them can be transferred to the brain we use, or misuse for that matter, in our habitual thoughts, desires, and feelings, and thus no memory whatever exists of them in kama manas, and to the souls immersed in that state they are non-existent, or at best perhaps hallucinations, dreams of another kind than those we so name. Further, this study of the instrumentation of the soul will make clear likewise the apparent gulf between the living and the dead, between one incarnation of the soul and another in this state and plane of life. Such memories as the soul garners and preserves of the experiences of the former life were transferred from the brain of that body to a higher kosha and a more permanent one, that sheath of the soul which is appropriate to our spiritual evolution and we all possess, even if we don't know it. In truth, there is no separateness between the living and the dead, no separateness between the experience of this life and the experiences of our precedent lives, any more than there is any loss or separateness in our identity from plane to plane or from life to life. The spiritual existence of each soul is continuous, conscious, unbroken by missing links of memory or experience. And what is that sheath that we're talking about? Well, I think in the mysteries of afterlife it is explained, and it is called the thread, the silvery thread that the aroma of each incarnation is stored like beads on a string. So this thread, the silvery thread, is called the Sutratman in a lot of the Theosophical writings. It's the Sutratman. Sutratman. So that's where it is stored. The Sutratman. But it is really vain to search for such missing links through hypnotism, mesmerism, medium, psychic research, mental telepathy, or occult practices and practitioner rites, rituals, and dogmas. It is vain for the scientist to search for his missing links of evolution from the astral to the physical in the strata of Earth. Each new discovery increases his perplexities. It is vain, it is stated, to search for the missing links of our spiritual and intellectual nature in the mazes of astral, elemental, pranic, kamalokic, and devalokic states of consciousness. However, we dream of them as being spiritual and psychic and gild them with lofty appellations. So, kama manas has always done that, esteeming that the meaning and significance of the occult phrase, the kingdom of heaven, must be taken by violence, while neglecting and ignoring the other equally occult saying, thieves and robbers. So what exactly are we talking about, this violence? So the violence to be undertaken is that pointed out to us by Jesus of Nazareth, Buddha, and all the descendants among men from on high. It is the subjugation and subjection of the state of kamamanas of human life to the highest dictates of the soul, observation and action from the basis of the eternal principles of the eternal soul. Ethics and morality, philosophy and religion are not mere words, but the stern and implacable realities, whose real significance has to be grasped and enforced here and now upon that state of consciousness and action that we call life. So dreams, therefore, constitute for the human being his sole channel of subjective communication of the experience of the higher life, as the messages and examples of the incarnated ones constitute the sole external guide in the contradictions and confusions of earth life. These dreams at all times correspond with exactitude to the moral nature of the dreamer and his cohesion and affirmation of that moral nature in the stream of his daily thought and action. This is but to say that the spiritual and intellectual elements of his evolving intelligence must be constantly kept paramount to the physical, that kamamanas must be made constantly the servant of atma buddhimanas, that any and all propensities, predilections and tendencies of the lower nature must be converted into forces ruled by higher intelligence, not as now obtains with us, for the most part, treated as the real and enduring part of our nature, to which our ideals and aspirations, our noblest impulses and thoughts are made mere servants and ministers. So then, here we're talking about here is the spirit. It does not incarnate in us at this time. This is Atma. This is Buddhi, the spiritual discernment. And wisdom, and this is Manas. And here again we are facing Manas. Manas works in two different ways, we said. Its higher aspect, if it goes up, it is influenced by Buddhi. If it goes downward, it is Kama. And this is where we are, most of us. And that personal element in us is morally in the ascendancy. And so we gauge and judge everything around us from this perspective, thinking that our intelligence or intellectual ability is the highest that we have, because the other, the higher, does not come into play most of the time, because the soul is not awakened to its own inner life yet. Dreams, whether waking or sleeping dreams, are of 7 great classes or subdivisions, according to teachings of the occult psychology, and in their entirety constitute the highest as well as the lowest range of impressions of the experiences of the human soul, or kamamanas, that are possible of transfer from other states of consciousness to this. In all this, of course, we are speaking of the ordinary man, the adept, the master, the yogi, the mahatma, the Buddha, as real beings of transcendent knowledge, power and glory, not the creatures of our human fancy and imagination that we call by those names. Each of these lives is more than 3 worlds while incarnated upon this world, and they are fully conscious of them, all the while the ordinary man is only conscious of the first, the waking life. As the word conscious is now understood and applied, many are those who, while bodily incarnated on this world, still exist for all that as independently as they did in the infinitudes of space. So, the 7 classes of dreams are as follows. Prophetic dreams. The first one is prophetic dreams. Perhaps we should put these up here. I'll put the Petri up here. Prophetic dreams. These are impressed on our memory by the higher self. In other words, in sleep, the brain is activated and are generally plain and clear. These impressions are generally plain and clear. Either it is a voice that is whispering the reality to us, or the coming event is foreseen on the inner lines of our being. The second one, allegorical. Allegorical dreams. These are hazy glimpses of realities caught by the brain and distorted by our fancy. These are generally halfway true. The third ones are dreams sent by adepts. Sent by adepts. And when we say adepts, they can be good or bad, in the sense that white or black is how they're defined in the writings, or mesmerizers, or by thoughts of very powerful minds bent on making us do their will. So sometimes people do really ugly deeds, and they say, I was told to do it, and we don't really believe them. But this is a true fact, that in sleep we can be contacted, and that impression would be so strong that the person would think that he was following his own will. And the next one is retrospective. Retrospective dreams. These are events normally and usually belonging to past incarnations, and they're just brought forward because it has a purpose. And the fifth is warning dreams. And we are in our dream warned as to what is going to happen to someone else, and it is impressed on our own brain so that we can help the other person. And then we have the confused dreams. What we perceive or subjectively see at night in the real realm of the self, when awakened, gets mixed up with whatever it is we're thinking about, and so they become really confused. And of course then there are dreams which are mere fancies and chaotic pictures owing to digestion, some trouble, or such like external cause. And we know when we go to bed with a really full stomach, this is the case. So every theosophist who is in earnest ought to know the intimate interrelationships of the three ordinary human states. And she gives this in the voice of the silence. Jagrata, or waking, Jagrata or waking consciousness is one in which we must be regenerated. The swapna or dreaming swapna is dreaming. I put the Sanskrit term on the board. And Shushipti is the dreamless asleep. Shupti. That's the dreamless asleep. And how especially essential it is that one should not lose in swapna or the dreaming state the memory of the experiences in Sushipti, in other words, that dreamless state that we go through, nor in Jagrata those of swapna, and vice versa. In other words, when we go to sleep, from waking we go to dreaming, and dreaming to dreamless sleep every night. This is the path of going where? Higher levels of consciousness. Because once the brain and the mechanical portions of our body is incapacitated, then the soul or the ego, this is the higher ego we're talking about, the individuality, is free to live its life on those higher levels of consciousness, because that ego is a spiritual entity. This physical body is then hampering it all the time, and it cannot sift down to us its knowledge. And we're being advised to cultivate these states of being aware as to what happens in them, so that we can bring that experience, those spiritual experiences that this higher ego goes through, so that it can help us during our daily life. And Mr. Judge in his writing says this is not just only beneficial, but it's the duty of every human soul to learn how to do it. So then, we just said, in the waking consciousness, which is Jagrata, we must be regenerated, where we must come to a full consciousness of the self within, for in no other is salvation possible. So, as we awakened souls, this is not a one-step process. It cannot be done fast, but slowly, as we attune ourselves to this ego, the higher ego's aim, because we have come to a particular thing in this life, but because of the kama manasic entity, we forget the objective we have come for. And this higher ego cannot tell us what to do. It does not belong on this plane. Jagrata and kama manas go together, not the higher mind. The higher mind entity goes with that ego. And until we become activated on those field operations, we don't know what happens there. So as far as the kama manasic entity is concerned, it doesn't take any place, because it is so far beyond, it does not leave any impression on the brain, because the brain is asleep. In the prophetic dreams, this ego is actually activating the brain ganglionic parts that is necessary for it to impress what it needs to tell us, so that we can bring it into our waking consciousness. So when a man passes out of the Jagrata, whether it is death or dreaming, he goes to that supreme condition, or to other states of consciousness, heaven, hell, Avicii, Devakan, whatnot. But he cannot go to the supreme state unless he has perfected and regenerated himself, unless the wonderful and shining heights on which the masters stand have been reached while he is in a body. This consummation, so devoutly desired, cannot be secured unless at some period in his evolution the being takes the steps that lead to final attainment. These steps can and must be taken. In the very first is contained the possibility of the last, for causes once put in motion eternally produce their natural results. Among those steps, then, are our acquaintance with and understanding of Jagrata, Swapna, and Sushipti, waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep consciousness. The three conditionings of Kamamanas corresponding to his spiritual, intellectual, and physical or personal evolution. Jagrata acts on Swapna, producing dreams and suggestions, and either disturbs the instructions that come down from the higher state or aids the person through waking calmness and concentration, which tend to lessen the distortions of the mental experiences of dream life. By natural action and reaction, we either poison or purify both Jagrata and Swapna. The ordinary man, by reason of the want of focus due to multitudinous and confused thought, has put his Swapna field or state into confusion. And in passing through it, on his return from the dreamless state, the useful and elevating experiences of Sushipti become mixed up and distorted, not resulting in the benefit to him as a waking person, which is his right as well as his duty to have. Here again is seen the lasting effect, either prejudicial or the opposite, of the conduct and thoughts when awake. The clearing up and purifying of a Swapna can only be done in Jagrata or waking by concentration upon his thoughts, upon noble purposes, upon all that is best and most spiritual in us while awake. For Jagrata or waking and Swapna, the dreaming, stand to each other alternately in the relation of the Indriyas. The best result cannot be accomplished in a week or a year, perhaps not in a life, but once begun, it will lead to the perfection of the spiritual cultivation in some incarnation. Perhaps I should stop here and open it for questions, and we will read from the transactions if we have time. Yes?
Thank you so much for your talk on dreams. I think that it's an incredibly important topic. Does Theosophy teach how to have a lucid dream?
Well, yes. It doesn't teach it, but the suggestion is in the dream section of the transactions. It is stated that you have to activate your will. This will, the spiritual will. What is that, do you think? Where is that? What power is that?
The higher self.
Higher mind. It belongs to it's a power of the higher mind. And that higher mind entity here, if it goes towards Buddhi Atma, Atma and Buddhi really do not kind of incarnate. Buddhi more incarnated than spirit, but Buddhi is the light that shines on the manas, Buddhi manas in other words. That's what we are working on. Rather than Kama manas, they want us to become Buddhi manasic. I'm not writing very well. I don't know what's going on with this pen, Herb.
Good.
Let's do it this way. Here we are. Buddhi manasic. Where are the masters, by the way? On that plane. That's the spiritual plane. So they're saying that through this process we just described between waking consciousness, dreaming consciousness, and dreamless sleep, there is the fourth state, which is Triya, that she talked about in the Voice of the Silent. That's the highest we can go, and it's called Samadhi. And all of the perfected beings can go into a state at will. So in order for us to activate this will, what is it that you must do? We have given a lot of talks on this subject. You need to gather it all from different things and put it together, but it is universal. It is not just belonging to one person. It's part of the higher mind entity. Higher mind, where is it at? It has a plane of function where it is omniscient in its own plane. What is that called? Chitta. So in order to that function to become active in you, what must you do? You must elevate. You must elevate your nature. It's just a necessary step, even in understanding these dream and beyond states. How do you do that? We gave talks on that too. How do we do that? Altruism. Through altruism. In other words, you have now come to a point where you have identified yourself as the unit of the human kingdom, because humanity is a kingdom. Every unit is just a unit in that kingdom. So once you identify yourself with that kingdom, you're saying, I want to work for the whole, not for the part. So that's what has to take place. And this is not, as we said, a one-step endeavor, because no one can purify and elevate their natures all at one step, right? You have to go towards what? The paramitas that she gave us, Dana being the first one, love and charity. She says, it said that in the first step is the possibility of the last. The first step is charity, kindness, and love for the other, because you're a unit and you are a part of the whole. So, and in many, many places they also say that each human being contacts those who are similar to his own nature, but it doesn't mean that we cannot show kindness to all of nature. Plus, you have assumed responsibility for all of the lower kingdoms because they look up to men for guidance. And not only that, the elementals. Elementals are the souls in all of those kingdoms that make it come about. Yes?
Do you think that it's possible within an 8-hour time span of sleep to experience multiple lifetimes?
It probably is, because in a dream, in a few seconds, you have gone through a whole lifetime. So I can't see why it should not be possible, but I do not know what the purpose or benefit would be unless you retain the experience that you went through when you come to the waking consciousness. And most of us don't even know that that state exists because it does not leave any residue on the brain. So then it's the instrument that we also have to refine, correct?
So, does Theosophy teach about the pineal gland?
Yes.
And how it's the seat of the soul?
Yes.
And through dreams it expresses itself?
It has, HPP has a big article in the Secret Doctrine, she explains it, yes.
And so we should decalcify it somehow? If it's
no, it's
closed
petrified. I don't know where I should. Petrified. It's petrified. Petrified. So what happened and how did it get petrified? In the Atlantean race, which is the fourth, we were spiritual entities. And instead of using our spirituality as descending into matter, we used it for destruction. And at that time, when the Atlantean race sank, the eye, the pineal gland, got withdrawn into the inner brain and got petrified. It does its work as a necessary thing. In other words, it has automatic functions. But in order for it to be fully functional, all these processes that we just talked about has to be gone through. It cannot be activated unless you express spirituality in your life. Buddhi manas has to be active in you. And that it gets functional again as a gift. It is not something that you can force to become active. It is what you do, how you behave, how you conduct your life, both personal work and service, that principle becomes activated. Now, this is a question. I wanted to read this. What are the principles which are active during dreams? These questions were put to HPB, and she actually answered them while she was here on Earth. The principles active during ordinary dreams, which ought to be distinguished from real dreams. The real dreams are the ones that are the experience of not the kamamanas, but the higher ego. She calls those real dreams, and called idle visions. Kamamanasik is the idle visions. Are kama, the seat of the personal ego and of desire, awakened into chaotic activity by the slumbering reminiscences of the lower mind. What is the lower manas? It is usually called the animal soul, nefesh, by the Hebrew Kabbalists. It is the ray which emanates from the higher manas, or permanent ego, individuality, and is that principle which forms the human mind. In animal instinct, for animals also dream. The combined action of kama and the animal soul is purely mechanical. It is instinct, not reason, which is active in them. During the sleep of the body, they receive and send out mechanically electric shocks to and from various nerve centers. The brain is hardly impressed by them, and memory stores them, of course, without order or sequence. On waking, these impressions gradually fade out, as does every fleeting shadow that has no basic or substantial reality underlying it. The retentive faculty of the brain, however, may register and preserve them if they are only impressed strongly enough. And this is what happens during the prophetic dreams when the higher ego impresses that brain. But as a rule, our memory registers only the fugitive and distorted images and impressions which the brain receives at the moment of awakening. This aspect of dreams, however, has been sufficiently observed and is described correctly in physiological and biological works. That which is entirely terra incognita for science is the real dreams and experiences of the higher ego, which are also called dreams, but ought not to be termed, or else the term for the other sleeping dreams should be called visions. So, yes.
So, you is it so a dream, a vision, and a dream, or at that level are the same? You know,
Well,
a vision and a prophetic dream. That's the higher level dream. Is that what I'm thinking about?
No, she says that is called the real dream. The prophetic ones are the real dreams, which is the experience of the higher ego in us. But they are of such a higher level of consciousness that it does not leave any impression on the brain, because the brain is asleep. It does not participate. And she says somewhere that if you consider the higher ego as being imprisoned during the day in the physical body, and the gaoler is the word she used, in other words, the person who is in charge is looking out of the window and sees this ego during the sleep like a shadow moving here, there, and yonder, but does not really participate as to exactly what is going on. But to the ego, what it does, what it thinks, how it feels and acts on those higher planes is objective, as our life in waking consciousness is objective to us here.
So I'm thinking about that category of sent by adepts, and also the discrimination we have to learn, and that's a major reason why it seems like we're here, to be able to interpret, and if it's universal or whether it's selfish. So that would kind of tell you if you were told to do something in a dream that is selfish.
The personal dreams are chaotic normally. They don't have any sequence of any sort. It's kind of jumbled up. But if you wake up with a clear and sound impression, then you know where that one came from. They're totally different. And HPB somewhere in here answers the question. She says that the masters probably help all of us that ask for their help, but they do it in deep sleep, so we have no recollection of it because Kama Manas is not active. It's Buddhi Manas that is active during those phases of our life, and we don't bring those impressions down, but we just read what Mr. Judge recommends, that when we go from the waking to the dreaming, we don't lose the connectivity, and from dreaming to the sushupti, which is dreamless sleep, again not lose the connectivity. And there is an article in his letters where he makes the suggestion that not to be diffused. He says, think of yourself going into those states through a tunnel. In other words, concentrate your effort in a narrow area, because we are diffused and we go to these states diffused and come back diffused. We don't retain anything. But obviously that concentration to make it not diffused and concentrated must have a tremendous amount to do with it, because if you go in a tube, it's narrow and it's not diffused, so your retention power probably increases as you learn how to manipulate your consciousness to be concentrated as you go from one state to the other.
Tom Paine talked about voluntary visitors. Could you associate that with a waking dream?
With what kind of dreams?
Dreams are usually thought of when you're asleep, but
well, in the
come to you when you're awake too.
In your dreamless sleep, we just said that the masters help. So they visit us during that dreamless sleep, and they interject those things into our mind. And it is so, impression is so strong that you wake up with it, and that's what I think Thomas Paine is talking about. And your own higher self can do the same too. The prophetic dreams are exactly just that. That impress is so strong that you retain the memory when you come back to the waking consciousness. And the scene, whatever it is that it wants you to see, is very clear. There is just absolutely no way you can mistake it with a chaotic dream, because it's so very clear, so crisp. You might not know what it means, but the impress is very clear. It's very clear.
Sometimes you wake up out of a deep sleep, and something is very clear, you know, and sometimes it really relates to something you've been trying to resolve. And then it's recommended also that you write it down, because it goes away pretty quickly too.
Yeah, when you wake up in the morning, you won't have it anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So they do say that have a pad and pencil or pen at your bedside, and if you should wake up with that kind of impress, just jot it down and not be lazy about it, because in the morning you won't have any recollection of it. Okay, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
we hope to see you next week.